What if? Zhou Enlai, the silent architect of China. Zhou Enlai had never wanted to be the loudest voice in the room. In history, he was always the shadow, the diplomat, the quiet operator whose genius worked behind curtains, unnoticed by those who craved spectacle. In this alternate world, the loudest voice never rose. Mao, weakened by illness and the erosion of his influence, never consolidated power, leaving a vacuum filled by Zhou. History, as it so often does, bent around his restraint. He did not crave adoration. He did not wield slogans like weapons. He simply acted, thinking of the survival of a billion souls before the exaltation of a single man. The first years were difficult beyond measure. The country was exhausted from decades of war, both against foreign invaders and against its own citizens. Villages were impoverished, roads were muddy paths in winter, rail lines were damaged or incomplete, and the industry of old China had been gutted, left to rust and rot. Zhou understood the delicacy of the moment. One misstep, and the fragile state would implode. Blood and chaos returning to lands that had barely recovered. He did not make speeches. He did not issue grand proclamations. Instead, he listened, calculated, and moved quietly, appointing capable men and women to positions based on ability rather than loyalty to any ideology. Every decision was measured. Every action was an investment in survival. For the peasants, these years were subtle, almost invisible in their benefits, yet life-changing in ways they could not articulate. Zhou refused to replicate the fanaticism that had once demanded impossible production from farmers, forcing them to melt their pots and pans into steel, leaving their fields fallow. Instead, he prioritized irrigation, agricultural research, and infrastructure that would bring lasting yield. Universities reopened, professors returned, scientists were given tools, not propaganda. Fields were mapped, grains catalogued, water systems measured and optimized. The people did not march under banners screaming slogans. They worked, as they always had, but now their labor produced results, not deaths. The famine that could have consumed millions never came. Yet Zhou understood the cost of inaction. The government could not provide prosperity immediately, and not everyone benefited equally. Certain regions, remote and poor, remained neglected. The early years of development favored urban centers and strategic areas where industry could take root. The disparity was glaring, but Zhou made a pragmatic choice. Some inequality now was preferable to chaos and starvation later. It was a bitter calculus, a price paid in silence, in patience, in quiet moral compromise. He never claimed to be just. He only sought effective. The technocrats flourished under his guidance. Factories were designed with efficiency in mind, not ideology. Machines replaced sheer human labor where it could. Engineers and managers were trained, and data, carefully collected, analyzed, and acted upon, became the backbone of progress. Zhou walked among the workshops, sometimes unnoticed, checking the layout of assembly lines, the speed of production, the morale of workers. He asked questions sparingly, always listening, rarely speaking, his presence a subtle reminder that competence mattered more than rhetoric. The people responded to efficiency and clarity, even if they did not yet understand the full vision of the nation taking shape around them. By the early 1960s, China began to resemble a country far more advanced than its neighbors might have predicted. Urban centers buzzed with cautious optimism. Electricity grids expanded. Railways connected industrial hubs. Ports were modernized to receive imports of machinery, technology, and knowledge, not just raw materials. Zhou's leadership was not celebrated in public squares. There were no statues erected, no songs composed. His presence was felt through the efficiency of the government, the effectiveness of the economy, and the subtle hum of progress in cities that had barely survived the war. Internationally, Zhou's restraint and foresight shaped China's emerging foreign policy. Without Mao's fanaticism, the nation did not lunge into wars to prove ideology. Diplomatic overtures were measured, strategic, and sometimes coldly pragmatic. China negotiated with the Soviet Union cautiously, extracting technology, advice, and cooperation, while simultaneously opening discreet channels to the United States, Japan, and European nations. There was no ideological grandstanding. There were no reckless interventions. Every handshake, every treaty, every quiet meeting in smoke-filled rooms was part of a deliberate choreography to ensure China's survival and growth, not global fame. At home, education became a quietly revolutionary tool. Zhou understood that the greatest resource of all was human capital. Schools were reopened, curricula carefully designed to balance technical knowledge with civic awareness. Scientists and engineers trained in both theory and application began to populate universities, research centers, and laboratories. The government invested in health, housing, and infrastructure, but always with the eye of a strategist. Every yuan spent, every resource allocated was weighed against its long-term effect on growth and stability. Despite his careful attention to every detail, Zhou Enlai remained invisible to the public. Newspapers wrote little about him. Journalists chronicled factory openings and harvest statistics. Not the man who orchestrated them. His face appeared rarely, only in the margins of history. But the country moved faster, smoother, and more resiliently than anyone outside could perceive. While the people in remote provinces continued to struggle, the urban population, the emerging industrial workforce, and the intelligentsia quietly flourished. Disparities existed, but they were tolerated as part of a long-term plan, a necessary imperfection to prevent immediate catastrophe. The years passed. By the mid-1970s, China had become a nation unrecognizable from the one Zhou inherited. Cities gleamed with the promise of modernity. Factories churned efficiently, and technological adoption surged. The population had grown more literate, healthier, and better trained in skills that would position them to compete on a global scale decades earlier than history had originally allowed. The streets were crowded with bicycles, trams, and early cars, symbols not of luxury, but of functionality and progress. China was quietly, methodically building itself into an economic powerhouse, its growth unheralded by the bombast that had marked revolutionary movements elsewhere. Yet the price of this quiet triumph was invisible and human. Millions in rural regions still languished in relative poverty, their labor sustaining the infrastructure that enriched others. The lower classes bore the silent cost of selective investment and progress. Zhou did not celebrate these disparities. He recognized them with a sober, almost fatalistic understanding. Governance, he knew, demanded decisions that were rarely fair but necessary. He bore the burden of knowing that some would always be left behind, that history would remember the successes but forget the suffering. It was a moral weight carried alone, in quiet offices at night, with the faint smell of ink and the hum of lights that never slept. Zhou's own life mirrored the solitude he imposed upon the nation. He did not marry fully into public life. He did not seek adulation or comfort. Even as the country advanced, he endured illness in silence, exhaustion and disease creeping unnoticed as he continued to orchestrate development, negotiate treaties, and balance competing interests within the government. There was no ceremony for his sacrifices, no medals, no accolades. His victories were measured in functional railways, consistent power grids, and steady economic growth, not in parades or applause. He lived as a ghost architect of a nation, shaping history without being permitted to dominate its narrative. Abroad, the effect of his policies became increasingly clear. China's early adoption of technological expertise and industrial methods, combined with cautious but open engagement with foreign powers, positioned the country to dominate global markets decades ahead of schedule. Foreign investment and knowledge flowed into the cities under Zhou's quiet guidance. Trade patterns shifted. Nations that had underestimated China's capacity for disciplined, technocratic development began to realize, slowly, that a giant was rising, not through ideology or conquest, but through meticulous planning, quiet efficiency, and the patient cultivation of its people and resources. By the 1980s, The effects were undeniable. Industrial output exceeded projections. Urban populations had access to education, healthcare, and housing at scales unimaginable in previous decades. The nation that had once staggered from war now moved with disciplined purpose. Global perception of China shifted from a backward, war-torn land to a strategic, reliable partner in commerce, capable of unmatched efficiency, and producing goods and expertise that reverberated across continents. Yet, the countryside remained a testament to the compromises made. While cities thrived, millions still lived with minimal services, dependent on the infrastructures built by urban centers. Their labor, while indirectly benefiting the nation, left them excluded from the immediate gains of development. The social contract was carefully calibrated: progress for some, survival for all, equality postponed indefinitely in favor of the long-term stability and growth that Zhou had envisioned. Zhou Enlai himself never claimed victory. Even as he aged, his body weakened, illness creeping silently beneath the surface. He continued to walk the corridors of power, to supervise budgets, agricultural programs, and foreign negotiations, his presence an invisible thread holding together a nation in transformation. He did not rest, and he did not speak of legacy. The triumph of China was his. Yet it was no one's to praise. History might recognize the architects of revolutions, the men who stormed cities and toppled regimes. But the silent builders, those who worked methodically and uncelebrated, rarely appear in memory. Zhou understood this, and accepted it with the quiet dignity that had defined his life. By the time of his final days, China had become a country remarkably modern for its era, a technocratic colossus of 1 billion people. It operated with the efficiency of a small, well-governed city-state, yet on a continental scale. Governance was neither oppressive nor completely free. It was measured, balanced, and adaptable. The social fabric was controlled softly, guided by incentives, education, and surveillance that did not crush, but influenced behavior. The nation was stable, predictable, and growing exponentially in both knowledge and wealth. The world outside began to notice not a revolutionary, not a dictator, but a nation that had quietly, invisibly, risen to prominence. China under Zhou Enlai's unseen hand became a model of selective technocratic development, balancing efficiency with restraint, innovation with social control, and growth with inequality, inevitable, yet carefully managed. In the end, history did not remember Zhou as a hero or villain, for he never sought such titles. His triumph was invisible, woven into the infrastructure of cities, the literacy of the young, the productivity of factories, and the measured prosperity of the nation. Millions lived because of his patience and strategic mind. Even if many never knew it, the loudest voices never rose, and the quietest architect reshaped a civilization, not through spectacle, but through steadfast, uncelebrated action. History moved differently because he acted silently, decisively, and without the need for applause, forever changing the trajectory of 1 billion lives, and, by extension, the world.